The fate of the Affordable Care Act is once again in the hands of the Supreme Court. The High Court heard arguments yesterday in the latest legal challenge to the landmark health care law. It's the third time Obamacare is back before the justices, but the first time since the High Court's shift to a conservative majority. The case centers on a challenge to the constitutionality of the individual mandate and calls for repealing the law entirely. For more now, let's bring in CBS News reporter Melissa Quinn. Melissa, thanks for joining us. What are some of the central questions that the High Court is considered yesterday?
So there were really three questions that the justices were asked to take up. The first is more technical in nature, that being whether the 18 Republican-led states and 2 individuals had legal standing to challenge the individual mandate. The second question was whether the individual mandate should be deemed unconstitutional, because in 2017, Congress zeroed out the fine for individuals who fail to obtain health insurance coverage. And the third question before the court was whether, if the individual mandate is indeed found to be unconstitutional, whether the rest of Obamacare should fall along with it. And that third and final question is the one that had Senate Democrats and supporters of the law really most concerned as to what the court would do.
So based on some of the questions we heard, a majority of the justices indicated they oppose the idea of striking down the Affordable Care Act in its entirety. Chief Justice John Roberts and Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh were among those who appeared hesitant. What are they saying?
Yeah, so I want to preface that it's always a little risky to try to read the tea leaves of the Supreme Court, but we did get pretty clear signals from both the Chief Justice and Justice Kavanaugh, as you mentioned, in terms of how they feel about striking down the entirety of the health care law. In one exchange with the Republican-led states, the lawyer who represented them, the Chief Justice said, it's hard for you to argue that Congress wanted the entire law to fall when it didn't even try to repeal the full Affordable Care Act. Now, when it comes to Justice Kavanaugh, he said, I tend to agree with you, speaking to Donald Verrilli, who argued on behalf of the House of Representatives. He said, I tend to agree with you that this is a very straightforward case in terms of that question of severability, whether the individual mandate can sort of be severed from the rest of the healthcare law. He later said that it does seem fairly clear that this is the proper remedy would be to sever the individual mandate and uphold the remaining of Obamacare's provisions. I think if you were to take those 2 votes along with those of the 3 liberal justices, it's pretty safe to say that it seems like there are 5 votes in favor of upholding the rest of the Affordable Care Act, even if the individual mandate were found to be unconstitutional. And for defenders of the law and those who benefit for it, they should be breathing a sigh of relief.
So we also heard from Associate Justice Amy Coney Barrett yesterday, and she appeared skeptical as to whether or not Texas and the other GOP-led states that actually brought the challenge forward, whether or not they had standing. Does her stance appear to have changed, especially since writing a scathing law review article following Roberts' decision to uphold Obamacare in 2012?
I think it was kind of hard to tell where Justice Barrett may fall on some of the key questions in the case, whether the individual mandate is unconstitutional and whether it can be severed from the rest of the healthcare law and the rest of Obamacare should stand. As you mentioned, the most of her questions were more technical in nature, focusing on the issue of standing. I think we did hear a lot from Senate Democrats during her confirmation hearing, sort of sounding the alarm that a vote to confirm Justice Barrett would be a vote to kill the entirety of Obamacare. I'm just not sure from her questions yesterday whether we can say definitively how she will come down on that issue. I also think that the format of oral arguments sort of took a little bit of the attention away from her questions. They went in order of seniority. They were conducted remotely by telephone because of the coronavirus pandemic. So when each of the 4 lawyers had their chance at the podium, so to speak, Justice Barrett was the last to go. And by that point, we had heard and were able to get a sense of where the other justices may be thinking.
So the question that is on everybody's mind is, when do we expect a ruling? Would that possibly be in the spring?
Yeah, the justices' term ends in June 2021. They like to keep the blockbusters waiting until the final weeks of the term. So I would say spring is when we can expect to hear from the court about the future of the healthcare law.
All right, Melissa Quinn, always great to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.